So how's your new year going along?
It's all my resolutions are still intact,
Um,
which is good.
that's
So
that's very good. It's not like a
yeah,
broken record.
yeah, yeah,
Did you do anything fun for New Year's? Like, I mean, obviously we had to do stuff a little bit different because of a pandemic, but
yeah. Well, New Year is a totally different animal for me these days. Obviously, well, not obviously, but I'm because I'm sober now, and back in the days, New Year sort of it's known as amateur night, but it was still one of those big nights that you go out, and a lot of the times I could just about still be conscious in time for New Year. But this year, I can still say that I was not conscious for midnight because I was tucked up in bed and asleep by 11. Um, so it's a different thing, but it's great then to be able to wake up on New Year's Day and not be destroyed.
yeah, I was going to be in that same boat, but unfortunately I fell under the amateur area.
Yeah.
And I forgot how much I do not enjoy waking up on New Year's with a nice little headache. So,
Hangover, yeah.
um,
Did you go out yourself?
no. I stayed home. I watched, what did I, oh, I watched The Godfather actually.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
It's
Revisited that.
interesting. Like The Godfather is one of those films that I've never seen, but I know it off by heart.
Yeah.
There's so many, and the same with Psycho, and there's a ton that they're so specifically critiqued through every podcast, every film documentary. I feel I don't need to see it now because I've seen every piece, and I don't, and I like with my film these days to see something brand new, and rarely will I revisit films because I try to get everything that I can in the first viewing, and to watch it to death, doesn't really do much for me these days. So
No, I totally get that. As far as Godfather goes, I've only saw the first one a couple years ago, probably 2015, 2014. And it wasn't in film school, surprisingly. It was like one of those films that everybody thought that you've already seen, so they didn't talk about it, right?
yeah,
Um, but this year was the first time I watched Godfather Part 2, and it was like back to back. It was kind of I don't know, it was kind of a cool experience. I didn't
yeah.
realize that it still holds up for being in 1970s.
Well, everything that was made in the 1970s still holds up.
Yeah,
You
for the
don't have
most
to
part,
deal
yeah.
with you don't have to deal with dodgy CGI.
Yeah.
So it's incredible on that as well. Like when you like early 90s CGI, when you first watch it in the 90s, you're like, wow, how can this get any better? And then even like watching it a year later, you're like, oh dear.
Yeah, it's
It's
because CGI is always improving, and I don't know, it's kind of fun with like was it Jim Henson, the puppet guy?
yep, yep,
Yeah. The puppeteer work makes the films age even better, I feel like, because there is I mean, you can't really age puppets. Like
yep, for sure.
they are what you see. So it's
Yeah,
kind of a fun approach.
yeah. And I find too with the practical effects of film, like with Jim Henson and stuff, and using the puppets, so you are more connected to the character because especially like we look at Yoda in Empire Strikes Back. Even though that is Frank Oz, it's Frank Oz that's manipulating the puppet. So you still get that humanity through it. And what I loved in the outtakes, whenever they would call cut, he would make Yoda go to sleep, rather than just, okay, cut, hands out, and then just lifeless Yoda. But he would make Yoda go to sleep so the actors could still have that emotional connection to it. And so, of course, when Yoda dies in Empire, spoiler, yeah, you're devastated, because you've got that humanity in it. But then we fast forward to the prequels, and it's just Yoda is a bunch of pixels, and he's doing somersaults all over the place, and you just don't have that. You just because it's lifeless pixels, And I would far rather have practical effects. And as we can see in The Mandalorian, I think if they had done it in CGI, and it would have been awful.
It would have been awful. And I kind of like to think of like Lord of the Rings as well, because like a lot of those war scenes with the orcs, it was like actually people dressed up. And then with The Hobbit, for whatever reason, they went with full on CGI, and it doesn't hold up. Like it's,
no.
Yeah.
No, and then even now, like so again, back to the 70s as the great decade of filmmaking, even though, yes, I'm aware they're stuntmen and they're perfect and they're harnessed, on top of the train, whatever, but there's still danger, that they could still fall off the train and there's still that life danger to them. But nowadays, everything's green screen, and I just can't get viscerally excited about, Tom Cruise, whatever. Of course, yes, Tom Cruise is still hanging on the side of the plane with it, but the majority of stuff, it's like I don't. It's green screen. There's no danger. There's no emergency or gravitas to the scene.
Yeah,
because there's just nothing real about it. But that's just me. So
no, I totally agree. Especially when you see like BTS of like the Avengers, for example. Tony Stark, he's not wearing even like the Iron Man suit at all. Like it's full on green screen motion captured, and it just blows my mind that they would even have him wear like a basic costume, like a suit, when he's not actually in action. Like it's just so. It's not weird that we've come so accustomed to CGI just because that's the way technology went, but I don't know, it would be kind of nice if like these big blockbuster films included, the old school way of filmmaking, because that's how it came to be. So,
and I think with independent film, it's going the other way because it is getting cheaper now to make suits, and to do the practical effects, and it's sort of like a boutique industry that people are wanting that again. Whereas now it's amazing. You look at the credits at the end of Avengers. There's like 100 people that worked on one CG, like all the coloring, all the texturing, and everything. Whereas you look at Ray Harryhausen, the Clash of the Titans, whatever. It was just him making. Just Ray Harryhausen did everything. Just one guy. It's incredible, and as I say, you're connected to the humanity of that. So
yeah, I've never actually considered being connected in that sense to that, but like it totally makes sense. Like reflecting on it, it's like, oh yeah, there is that connection. Yeah, that's kind of cool. But all right, well, let's have you formally introduce yourself, so we could put a face to the voice.
Cool. I'm Brian Higgins. I am the creative executive director of Mental Healthy Fit, which is films, ideas, and tips for mental health.
Oh, I had no idea that was what you're a part of.
Well, it's my own thing. I started I'm the founder. I'm everything, but that's behind the curtain.
So how long have you been doing that then?
I've been doing it about 7 years, all in. It's as with any business. It's all evolving, and year to year we find new things to do. So in its present state, it is Mental Healthy Fit, and just how we got there was originally it was called Create Real Change, and it was difficult for people to understand what that was. It was always that extra step in education. Like maybe I could get someone's attention, but then I would have to actually communicate what it is. And then we changed to Mental Healthy Utah a couple of years ago. And then that really helped, because if people look at the website or if they read the logo, they know exactly it's about mental health. And then it's only about, well, what is the difference between us? We're a creative interpretation expressive nonprofit rather than a therapy place. So we're not providing any diagnosis or medical treatment. What we say is we're therapeutic, not therapy. And then we changed to, and this is a trouble that we came across last year, was because Mental Healthy Utah, we couldn't beat the SEO on it, because if you type in mental health Utah, Google will every time change and say, "Hey, you must mean mental health Utah," and then give NAMI, give every other organization apart from mental health Utah, and I just couldn't beat it. And so all these other organizations were getting, free organic search, because like people will hear me on the radio or see a show, and they'll remember the name, and they'll not remember mentalhealthyutah.org, as
Yeah.
everybody does, just go into Google. And then they're finding these other mental health programs and thinking, oh, maybe it is this. And then they get the free stuff. So we changed to Mental Healthy Fit. And Fit, as I say, is films, ideas, and tips. And it's festivals, events, like TED Talk type things, and workshops for youth, and workshop for adults and mentors and things like that. And that helped us there, because then people were typing in Mental Healthy Fit, and Google was not thinking it was a geographic, just a geographic search. So that worked well, and now people know it. Again, people can read it; they know exactly what it is. They can decide, are they into it or are they not. And then one of the bonuses of the pandemic is suddenly mental health really came to the forefront, and everyone was suddenly looking for mental health resources. And the people that were maybe experiencing mental health issues like depression, anxiety for the first time in their lives, there's always that difficulty of like, oh, where do I find help? I can't go to see a therapist. I'm not going to, that stigma. So they would find us because they could interact with it on a creative level, and it would be that step removed, because they were understanding through characters, understanding through visceral experiences and communication, things like that. So we've done pretty well in the past year, and next year we just need to build on that, and just keep moving forward. So.
Well, that's cool. I actually had no idea that. Yeah, it makes sense. Like hearing that, I'm like, oh my god, like because there is a stigma about going to therapy. I'm actually like, for example, for me, like when I've struggled with some mental health stuff in the past, my family's trying to push me to go to therapy, and for whatever reason, like it's not for me. But my my outlet, I should say, is being creative in some sense, and I find more inner peace doing that, and so that's exactly what you provide, is from the sounds of it, like resources for that.
For sure.
That's
And
so cool.
our only thing is that we sort of help people through workshops about telling their story
Yeah.
through other characters. So it's easier for people who are first trying to express themselves to maybe put like a cat can't stop taking catnip,
Yeah.
make a film about that, tell a story about that, or but really the moral of it is it's really you can't stop drinking, whatever. But you can still have that one removed. Oh, that cat just can't stop taking the catnip.
Yeah.
Or things like that, and just really bringing it down to the emotional building blocks of mental health, and it's been very successful.
Yeah, that's so fucking cool. I'm gonna check out the website. I'm excited to actually link that because I think that's a really cool, fun
Cool.
resource. Cool. So what kind of transpired that then? Like, where were you at in life to kind of get that idea?
Well, it is based on my own recovery. I am, as I mentioned, I'm sober now. I have history. My childhood was conflict based PTSD, with the troubles back home, and the violence and everything. Uh, so the PTSD, depression, anxiety, all of that came together, and then alcohol and drugs played a part in self medication, because I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't have another outlet, and I ended up homeless. I ended up homeless for 2 years, living down in the shelter and on the streets, and just basically drinking myself to death. And how I turned it around was just being creative, like communicating creatively and communicating from the base emotion. Because again, my history, my past is very fantastical. The situations that I was in. So not everybody can resonate with that.
Right.
So when I was telling the stories just based on the building blocks, like this happened to me, I saw bombings, people being killed, people were scared. They couldn't, they would, initially there was sympathy, oh, poor guy, how can I help you? But it quickly became, fear because of how I'm not going to say that the evil media, but how the media has portrayed veterans. Every film, a veteran who has a flashback is going to go on a rampage, is going to wake up in the middle of the night strangling somebody. And that's what people visualize when I was talking about, violent conflict-based PTSD. So that got me nowhere because people were just fearful of me, because their perpetuation was that if they are my friend, if they get close to me, I'm going to end up attacking them at some point. Because yes, my flashbacks were pretty horrific, but the only person that I ever hurt was myself, And that is the truth of veterans with PTSD is they're in the basement on their own, contemplating suicide, or drinking themselves to death or drugging themselves to death. They're not going on rampages. Yes, there is a percentage of that, but the majority are in the basement crying. And I think the last time it was like 26 veterans commit suicide every day. Because of that, because of you people are scared. So as I say, that led me to being homeless and led me to drink myself to death. And how I started communicating differently, communicating about the emotion, because of course the PTSD is fear-based, anger-based, the same as my addiction, make the fear and the anger go away by using. So as like not everyone has had the experience that I have had, but everyone has experienced fear or anger or pain or joy or whatever. So when I started communicating with those base emotions through narratives, I could hook people in. I could make that visceral experience. So I could make people feel sad, I could make them happy. I could make them angry through storytelling. And then once I got them to have that visceral experience, I could then communicate the actual story, the actual moral, the actual origin of that. And then people would be able to put the box together, would realize, oh, I never thought that addiction was pain. I never thought that addiction was anger.
Right.
I just thought I just thought you wanted to take heroin, and then they can be more empathetic and maybe help and understand as they move forward. So that was really the beginning, and that's what got me off the streets and got me, moving towards where I am today. And as I say, like that was 7-8 years ago, and just trying to put the pieces together for myself of how I can use what I did for myself to help other people.
Yeah.
And so I started working at the VA I worked with a bunch of Vietnam veterans. And then I worked at treatment centers and all of these different areas for marginalized communities. And just over the years, I've been able to build the nonprofit into what it is today, and have, these specific programs that people can use. Again, they're very, very simplistic. It's just like storytelling. There's a beginning, there's a middle, and an end.
Yeah.
And again, I feel that mental health treatment nowadays is very antiquated, and self-help as well is very antiquated. You can go and buy a Tony Robbins book. It's 300 pages long, and you may feel better after you've read 300 pages. What I try to do is I try to make people feel, just like when you're drinking or drugging, you get that shot in the arm, you're feeling good. And I want to make sure that my programs give that as well, because if they don't, people are going to go back to the needle. People are going to go back to their negative coping mechanisms, and I want to provide that short and sweet equation to get you through to the next step. So,
yeah, one thing I've noticed is that with this pandemic, at least, it kind of made mental health more of an awareness than it has been in the past. And I think more people are definitely going to be looking for outlets,
Mhm.
to help themselves. So I think it's fucking cool that you've got that going on.
Cool.
Um, so how old were you then, like when you came over to the States?
I was 26, so 17 years ago. And I was in Boston originally. It was a special program, special visa because of the troubles. So I had to go to where they sent me.
Right.
And so I was in Boston for 6 years. And I had to do 3 years, sort of like probationary, and then I could get off the visa and then be freedom, whatever, and do what I wanted. Before, like it wasn't like a prison or whatever, but I had to abide by the stipulations, which was
Right.
more just conflict resolution. The whole aspect of the visa was to put people like me into communities in the States to have experiential experiences, both for myself, but also for the people that I was interacting with, because it would help with conflict resolution, would help with communication from my standpoint, from having the experiences I had, but then also just living with different communities and different cultures, and things like that. So I had to do that for 3 years, and then I got married, and I was able to get off the visa, and then I was an architect back in those days,
What?
and I won a bunch of awards. Not because I was any good. It was only because that's my dirty little secret. Like, so America is 5 years behind Europe in design, and Utah is 10 years behind America. So all I was doing was I was doing it the way, like, so basically what is known as a Google office, the open plan officing,
Yeah.
doing that in Europe in the 80s, but America was still, no, cubicle farm, stick 100 people in there. So all I was doing what I had done, as far as, but I was the golden boy because America was very much like, oh, this is amazing. so, so that was my dirty little secret that I wasn't inventing anything. I was just doing what I was doing, but people were pretty flabbergasted by it. So I won the awards, and then I got sent to Utah just in time in 2008 for the economy to crash. That was the end of architecture.
Yeah, Utah has a crappy economy for housing,
Yeah.
especially, and
Oh yeah, yeah, and especially what I did with creative, with conceptual, because I did
yeah,
commercial interiors. Um, so to have any forward thinking ideas, unless it looked like a log cabin, or I'd gone to Pier One Imports, it was a failure. And it was always because I'd be working with all these top CEOs, and they'd be going, "Oh, this is so great! This is an amazing concept, and we're going to be so efficient and productive." I'll tell you what, uh, my wife should look at these plans, and then it would all just fall apart. So, well,
so let me ask you this then: because you dabble in film, correct?
I'd say I'm more than dabble, but yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, like, what kind of what movies kind of inspired you to kind of move more into this direction and help you kind of with storytelling in that sense?
Well, so film has always been a major part of my life.
Okay.
It's always been an escapism. Again, it sort of ties into what I've been talking about, like my superhero origin story,
Right.
which film has always done that. We look at the Great Depression in the 30s. One of the main industries that was still thriving was film, because people would still, no matter what, they could still get their quarter because they would want to go to the cinema to escape
Right.
from the horrors of life. And I can remember I always wanted to be a filmmaker. This is very much like Goodfellas. For as long as I remember, I always wanted to be a filmmaker. But the industry just wasn't there for me growing up. And of course, the internet didn't exist. So I couldn't just go on to Facebook or Craigslist and say, hey, I want to make a film. And then everybody would turn up at the weekend, you'd make something, which is wonderful. You can do that now. So back in the days, as I say, I always wanted to make film, but none of my mates wanted to. So I started in stop motion because that was a way that I could sit in my bedroom and I could have my characters, my sets, I could build them all myself, and I could make them do exactly what I wanted. And I could make my little films, which is sort of seeped over into my life now because I'm a bit of a control freak and I can't handle when people won't do what I say, when I'm
Yeah.
not. But I remember again the difficulties that I was experiencing in the violence and the turmoil at just when 24-hour TV was coming on. Back in the days we only had a couple of channels, and 24-hour TV was coming on, and they needed content to to fill this space, and they would show the old Hammer horror films like at 2 o'clock, 3 a.m. And I would wake up in the morning. Set my alarm and get up, and I'd get some milk and cookies, and I would watch Frankenstein, I'd watch Dracula, and I'd watch the Wolfman and all these things. And as a little boy, I was like, wow, this is great. Look at all these monsters. Look at these buxom wenches, and look at this. This is incredible. And it's my big secret because everyone else is asleep, and I'm watching these horror films. But in my later life and in recovery, I can look back on that and see that it was, as I say, it was escapism, because the monsters, the real life monsters that I was seeing on a daily basis and on the news, terrorist atrocities, killing people, I could remove myself because I could think, oh, well, at least you're not Dracula, at least you're not the Wolfman, I know that there's worse monsters, so I don't need to be scared of you, so I can still move forward, so I can not be under your jackboot, so to speak, and I can progress. So originally, I would say that the Hammer horror films were the ones that really got me in, and they provide so much joy for me even today. I love going back and watching them. And I love Peter Cushing. I love Christopher Lee.
Yeah.
Again, the practical effects of that, and just to know that the Hammer horror, they were such a small studio. There's a story actually with Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. were big fans of Hammer horror, and in the 70s they went to England to do their British tour, and they were so excited when they went to London because they thought, well, we're going to go to the Hammer Studios, and they go and they go in and they sit down in the vestibule of this big house, and they think that it's like just a waiting room, but it was the studio. Like they made everything in this old Victorian country house, and they would just sort of turn the camera around and point it a different direction, or they could go into the forest. And every Hammer film was made in this Victorian house. And Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr., because they were used to Hollywood, like sound stages and everything, and like Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee were just sitting drinking a cup of tea in the front room of this house. And I think that story is just so adorable, But yeah, but those films, and just as I say, the fantastical and the escapism of storytelling, and that type of thing.
So since you have a history in architecture, then are you pretty
I am very pretty, yes.
Pretty, oh yeah. Pretty direct with set design in that sense.
To an extent, I use a lot in my architecture. As I say, it was commercial architecture, so I did a lot of psychology, because it was really about how can I make people more efficient and more productive by putting colors on the wall. How can I use color psychology to influence them? How can I, change the chamfer on the edge of the corner, so it subconsciously, helps you with your day-to-day business. So in set design, I will influence those pieces. But with the budgets that I'm working on, I don't really have the budget to go off and build a set to the exact specifications that I want. But I can always influence, and I can always put little bits and pieces that maybe aren't supposed to be in that scene. I'm very much into the whole the Dogma 95 aspect of filmmaking, whereas, again, to create that visceral experience for the viewer, it's not going to help the film if I'm going to do a scene in a doctor's office, so to speak, and
Yeah.
it's this devastating scene where the character gets diagnosed with cancer and gets given 2 weeks to live, whatever. That's not going to help me convey that emotion if I go and build a set to what I think a doctor's office looks like.
Yeah.
Because it's not a doctor's office. It's a couple of fake walls, and a gurney. So what I do on that standpoint, again from the lower end budgets, is I will go and find a doctor's office that has been lived in for 20, 30 years, that has given that type of information and that type of diagnosis to thousands of people, so that becomes a piece of the storytelling.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about Dogma 95. It's like, if I need a space that has a particular lamp, I go and find that place that has that lamp, because that's where it lives and that's where you're going to believe it.
Yeah.
But again, if I go to the DI and buy any kind of lamp and go and stick it on a table, it's going to be out of place. And I think, it's a simple way to do it, and it works, and people can feel that and the believability of it. But the issue nowadays is, I feel the majority of filmmakers that are growing up, that are being influenced by film and wanting to become a filmmaker on any level, from being a hobbyist filmmaker to a full-on professional, want to be a director, they are only being influenced by the Avengers or Star Wars, whatever. So that's the type of films that they're wanting to make. They're wanting to make the big flash bang out in space. So there isn't a believability. They haven't been raised with The Godfather, with 70s film.
Yeah.
I'm sure they will know about them, but the chances of them sitting down for 3 hours and being connected to it is not going to happen. And just because a film needs to be a sci-fi, you can still tell an incredible sci-fi in a sci-fi setting with the emotion of the characters, rather than there's a spaceship flying around blowing things up. I want to talk about the family members who just lost their dad.
Yeah.
Who died in a bombing, whatever, And there's some incredible 70s sci-fi films, Solaris and Outland, like tons and tons of stuff, and Alien, Alien 70, it's just incredible stuff. So
I love Alien. That's one of my favorite horror flicks.
Yeah.
And it's also one franchise where people either like the second one more or the first one, kind of like The Godfather, like either of you like the first one or the second one more.
Or you can be pretentious and say that you like the third one more.
Oh, dude, that's going to start fights. Not with
but
me.
You got it. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I just barely finished watching the third one today. I thought it was okay. Like, I didn't hate it.
Is that your first time?
That was my first time. Yeah. I bought the Blu-ray collection like a year ago, and it's just been sitting. And since, just sitting at home during a pandemic, why not watch 3-hour movies?
Well, because so many people forget that Alien 3 was David Fincher.
Right. Yep.
No, and everyone will hold Fincher to a high regard and everything else, but for some reason they just completely slap Alien 3. And I think with Alien 3, there is, because it doesn't really fit into the realm of Alien films. So it's still an incredible sci-fi film if you just look at it from that standpoint. I love it, from within the Alien franchise. It's great if you want to jump into the special features and see how it all went wrong. It was, they were all going to be monks rather than prisoners. And it was going to be a planet made out of wood, which would have been really cool. Lots of cool stuff in there, but yeah, it's a great one.
Is there 2 or 3 different cuts of that? There's the assembly cut, director's cut, and
there's as many as Blade Runner, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it's always fun to ask with Blade Runner. People are like, "Oh, I finally watched Blade Runner." Okay, like which cut? Because with Blade
Yeah.
Runner, actually, like the outcome kind of like depending on what cut you watched will kind of change your perspective of like how it is, you know.
Yeah.
Final cut, he's more of a replicant. And then the theatrical cut, he's a human.
Yeah.
And then Blade Runner 2049 doesn't answer any of those and adds
Yeah.
more to it.
Yeah, and that's a great thing as far as for true film people, and then also for people that have gotten this attention span. So for to mental healthy stuff,
Yeah.
I don't show Blade Runner because it's far too long to be able to do that. But there are other elements as far as the subjective nature of like I
Right.
could show you 3 scenes and you can get 3 completely different concepts out of it, but it's exactly the same scene. It's exactly the same characters, saying the same dialogue, but maybe the lighting has changed, or maybe one little cut has changed, or one angle has changed. And that's again with mental health, it's subjective nature.
Yeah.
You know, how people can project onto people the negative elements. So
Yeah, I think it also shows just like the power of cinema as far as storytelling goes, you know.
yep, for sure.
It's a lot of stuff that goes with it. Do you also write?
I write as far as concepts. I try to, I want stuff to live in the scene.
Right.
So again, a lot of my stuff, because I've sort of transitioned now into mental health stuff, I need people to just live in that moment. And I find if I write, as I say, like I'll write concepts, I'll know, okay, here's the scene. I need you to go across the room and make some coffee, whatever. However you do that is how you're going to do it. And you need to convince someone else that they should have some coffee as well.
Yeah.
And if I write out all that dialogue, my voice is going to sound negative. It's not going to sound correct to the actor that's saying it.
Right.
So I need them to say it truthfully, how they would do it. So conceptually, yes, I'm a writer, but dialogically, not really. And because as I say, it needs to be in that moment. Right. I want that commitment. And a lot of my stuff these days is live filmmaking. And when I'm working with an audience, I want them to have that knowledge right now, because if it is scripted and if it has been rehearsed, it might as well be Shakespeare. And people will then be disappointed because they'll have seen Laurence Olivier do Macbeth or whatever. I need it to be right in that moment and connect in that second. So.
Yeah, there's a filmmaker, Joe Swanberg. He is a mumblecore indie filmmaker, but he's known to improvise.
Yep.
He'll tell the actors improvise, give them the concept of the scene and let the camera roll. I think that's a really fascinating technique. Film.
Yep. No, and it works, as I say, within the structure of what I'm trying to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Not within the structure of, massive multi-million-dollar things. And I have been on those types of projects before, and it just doesn't fit me.
Right.
It's too difficult. So because there's no realism.
Yeah. I like realism in film. I like film, dude. And by the way, you introduced me to 2 new groups on Facebook. For like talking about films, and every film that these members post, I always add it to my watch list on Letterboxd, just because it's more to add to the inventory. And there's a lot of stuff on there where I'm like, I would have never even heard of this if it wasn't for this group. Like it's a lot of kind of lowball films. I think it's fascinating. So thanks for that, by the way.
Sure. That's the gentleman's guide, yeah.
Yeah. And then some of the discussions on there that it's actually like really thought provoking at times.
Yeah, for sure.
More so than like other groups I've been a part of. So, so as far as the your stay, what was it? Mental health fit, right?
Yeah, mental healthy fit. Yeah.
mental healthy fit. Where do you hope that takes you in the next coming years?
To end stigma in mental health.
Yeah.
That's the mission. You know, just to keep moving forward and to influence people and to work with people. And one thing actually that's cool is the projects that I'm getting is pretty incredible now, because people are really starting to resonate with concepts, what they're doing. And I am pretty much one man band, so there's obviously with growth I will need to bring in other people, other structure, but I do want it to be a national nonprofit. It is a national nonprofit, but I want it to be the go-to place, because it's the only nonprofit that's doing what I'm doing, but it's just about getting it in front of the right people, and it'll get there. There's no problem. And really, as a whole, one of my goal in life is to win an OBE or a CBE, which is a knighthood. And it's lofty goals, but that's what I want. I would love to get a knighthood for services to mental health, and I think that I can get there. They're doing what I'm doing, and then I'll be Sir Brian Higgins.
You're always Sir Brian Higgins, sir.
Yeah.
And let me just so I can understand. You lived in Ireland, correct?
Yeah, in Northern Ireland, yeah.
Northern Ireland. And is that where the IRA stuff was happening? Okay.
Yeah.
Because that was before I was born, so that's just history. So and I'm sure you've recently voiced with like Wonder Woman. I didn't know there were stereotypes of the Irish in movies. Yep. So you brought up an interesting point where there is a line in there. Because I'm sure as much as I know about Ireland and cinema is Sons of Anarchy, and I'm pretty sure that's not the great source.
That's a documentary.
So what is there any Irish cinema that like people should be more aware of?
Yeah, there's tons. There's an amazing Northern Irish film industry right now, because Game of Thrones was all shot there. They actually, where the Titanic was built, it's the Titanic Film Studios now, and all of those big shipbuilding warehouses are now film building warehouses, sound stages. So there's an incredible film industry there now, and tons of stuff are being made there. But before that, there was still a great industry. As far as one, so obviously, like we can look at the Troubles. Okay, so the Troubles, it's basically civil war violence for hundreds of years, Catholic versus Protestant. And what I look at that, we had that opportunity as you're growing up and you're seeing these difficulties around you. You've got a choice. You're obviously going to be angry about it. Your friends are getting killed, whatever. You're doing all these things, and you're going to be influenced by that community. So you can choose. I'm going to pick up a gun. I'm going to pick up a bomb, and I'm going to go and attack my perceived enemy. Or you can express your anger through another sense,
right? Which
I think a lot of people did. So we look at the world-class talent that has come out of Northern Ireland on a creative standpoint. So again, Northern Ireland is the tiniest little insignificant country on the world scale. And we look at the population, and out of that population, we get Liam Neeson, we get Kenneth Branagh, we get Van Morrison, we get, George Best, we get amazing, Thin Lizzy, we get amazing rock stars, amazing football. And all of these people, they chose the other way. They chose to channel their anger to become this great stuff. And the ratio of that is pretty amazing per capita. Whereas you look at, yes, there's world-class people all around the world, but the the percentage of them is very low compared to the population. So I see that as a benefit. So of course there was a lot of storytelling, and of course there's like Seamus Heaney, all the poets, Oscar Wilde, all of these great, incredible bards that just had a different voice,
right,
due to the difficulties that they were experiencing, and not just about the troubles, but we go back to the potato famine. We go back to just how the genocide of the Irish, the mass exodus, just everywhere you go, there's always an Irish person that has got, troubled story of how to get there. But as far as film, you've got it. The films that are made about Northern Ireland are very much propaganda because they're talking about the IRA, they're talking about the difficulties.
I think, yeah, 'cause I think there's one film that I watched that Brad Pitt was in.
Yeah, The Devil's Own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's representative of the area or if he even did a good job, but
Well, the funny thing about that film is back in when I was like 15 or 16, I worked in a skateboard clothing shop.
right.
And this fella came in, and I thought that guy really loves Brad Pitt because that guy just really loves Brad Pitt because he has just formed himself on Brad Pitt, just thinking that was it. And then, the next year, Devil's Own comes out. So it was probably Brad Pitt that came into the shop. He was there to work on the accent. But at that time, I thought, hey, it's not, no way would it be Brad Pitt, But yeah, The Devil's Own with Harrison Ford. But that's the type of film. It's like the perpetuate that,
right,
the IRA aspect, but the homegrown filmmaking. One of the Crying Game. Have you ever seen that?
I have not. No.
That's one with Stephen Ray and Forrest Whitaker.
Okay.
That was one of the first indie films that people were like, oh my God, indie cinema, just like a sleeper hit. And it's just like, oh, fucking hell, this is the best film of the year. But you should try and hunt down the Crying Game. And there's just great storytelling and great perseverance through Northern Irish film. So that is not specific about the Troubles. So.
Yeah, because the most recent thing I saw that relates to the Irish culture in a sense is Wolfwalkers, which is that new animated film about the kind of like a take on werewolves is the way I took it as. But the Celtic lore, though, I think Celtic stuff has a lot of cool lore behind it.
Sure.
The Irish and even the Scots, for that matter, the Scottish people. But my family stems from Scotland, for the most part, way back in the day. So because my last name is Campbell. That's what I was born with. So I always try to look into that culture. The culture of being Scottish, and then I've always kind of paralleled them being kind of similar to the Irish, but I don't know if that's even fair. Is that fair?
Yeah, for sure. Well, they're all Celtic. Northern Ireland is very close to Scotland, obviously geographically, but also there's because I'm Ulster Scots is my heritage.
Okay.
So I am Scottish to an extent, but Northern Ireland would be very close to Scotland because they were so close and they would go back and forward.
Is there any history behind between Scotland and Ireland in that sense then? Bad history or
not really. They would be more allies, and against the English, it would be that because it was just that level. But as I say, Ulster Scots were very connected because people would go back and forward. It was so close on the boats. You would actually go to church, and a lot of the people from Scotland would come over on the boat on Sunday mornings to go to church.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's that's so cool.
Back in the days in their rowboats. So
I think that's really cool. Because on my travel list is actually Ireland and Scotland at some point in my life when COVID's not a thing.
Yeah.
But I'm sure with American politics, they probably are like Americans stay away. So,
Well,
who knows with that? But yeah, I don't know. I'm always fascinated with the history of with the Celtic stuff.
yeah. Well,
Especially
you talked about the folklore aspect,
yeah, because there is
and
a lot of folklore and that's storytelling essentially,
yeah.
within those countries. So is there any lore that like do you have a favorite lore?
Well, there's a couple of different ones. So the jack o' lantern
Okay.
stems from everything in Halloween. Basically, stems from Ireland. That's
Right.
the way it is, and how it changed to the pumpkin because originally it was turnips, and
Oh.
I grow turnips and I carve turnips and I don't carve pumpkins because I'm staunch and refuse to. But I like the origin of where that came from and the will o' the wisps. So the will o' the wisps was out in the peat bogs at dusk. The methane would escape and they would look like little ghosts and stuff. So you would think again, like back in the days, you didn't have technology, you didn't have science, so you saw things and then you just made up a story to try and understand what it was. So obviously, it's going to be a ghost that's going to come and hurt you because you don't know what it is. So let's make it scary, just in
Right.
case it will hurt you. Um, so I like the jack o' lantern, and there's also a story about co-walkers. They're called, and it's basically doppelgangers.
Oh,
And
okay.
so if you're out on a foggy night, and you meet your doppelganger, you're not, and they say hello to you. If you say hello back, then they consume you, and then they become you. So you're not allowed to. You can't make eye contact, and you can't communicate with them. So if you do meet your doppelganger, just ignore it and walk away. I think that's a great story, and I think there's so many. There's hundreds of Irish folklore, and we only scratch the surface with like the banshee and all of these ones that people are aware of. And I think how films these days, how horror films are just constantly like refurbishing, regurgitating the same old stuff. Just go and find some crazy Irish monster, Irish folktale, and that's your story right there. Because they're hundreds of years old. They've been refined from you know granny to grandchild to scare them to go to sleep. And these are amazing tales, and people just aren't mining those areas, to get new stuff because people just want the same old tripe.
Yeah, there's two horror films that I know took place in Ireland and they were made by Irish filmmakers. Hole in the Ground, which was at Sundance a couple years ago.
Yep.
I saw that at Sundance. I'm like, okay, that's a really fun story. It's obviously it'd suck to live isolated like that and have these little creatures haunt you. But there's also let me find the filmmaker real quick. He's the guy who directed The Nun, or Corin Hardy. He did The Hallow, which
Yep.
is kind of the same concept ish as the Hole in the Ground, with these little creatures. It's just I don't know. Yeah, you're telling me that this like the doppelganger one, especially like that number one, that's creepy. I would never want to come across that. But I feel like have you seen Enemy with Jake Gyllenhaal?
Yep. Yep.
It kind of plays with that idea in a sense, where this doppelganger seeks out his other one and then consumes his life, even though it's more like a mind fuck than that. But dude, yeah, that's a lot. I didn't know the Banshee originated from Ireland either. I thought that was just a horror story within whatever.
No, the banshee is there, and I can say like I have heard a banshee wail in my days. But
What?
but that's another story.
Dude, go into it.
Well, so again, I lived my town back home was the quintessential little town with the thatched cottages and just this little one pub town, and miles and miles of countryside and glens and old monasteries and things like that. So we would go and underage drink in the glen. You know, you'd
So
be and it,
what's underage drink in Ireland? Is it because is it 18 over there to legally
18,
drink?
18
Okay.
is legally to drink. So I like 16, 17 I would
Okay.
have been at this stage. So, and we would all go to the glen, and this is the type of like, have you seen the witch?
I love The Witch.
Yeah. So it's like it's like a field and then just forest, you
Oh
know, and
no.
you can walk like 5 foot into that forest and then you'll never see it again. So that's what the glens were like. And it was easy to go underage drinking there because you'd never be found. You know, you're not going to randomly get caught by a dog walk or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, so we'd be out there boozing away, and we were, you know, drinking, and it wasn't so late. Like it was probably on about 9 o'clock, so we weren't totally stocious or whatever. Like we could still put sentences together, and we heard this screaming. So basically, the banshee. The story is that the banshee, if you hear it wailing, um, somebody is going to die. That's the thing. It's coming to take somebody away. It's like the Grim Reaper type thing.
Okay.
And if you hear it wailing, it's going to be someone in your family. But if you see it, it's you. Um, and that's the thing. And Disney made a great film called, well, Darby O'Gill and the Little People. It was Sean Connery's first ever film with
Ooh.
leprechauns, and he goes and finds King of the Leprechauns and stuff. And there's a banshee in that, and it's still terrifying to this very day, you know. Um, but anyway, so we're up boozing away, and we heard this screaming, and again, we're all just young fellas, young macho fellas, you know, full of testosterone. Roar, must be some girl getting attacked. Let's go. Roar, let's go and save this damsel in distress.
As you would if you're 17, yeah.
Yeah. And so we're all like marching down. And this scream was getting like more blood curdling and like the closer that we got. And we got to the point where it was like just around the corner. And
Okay.
again, we're in there, like it's pitch black, you know, you can't, he's just banging into trees left, right, and center. You can't see a thing. And it was right there, it was right around the corner. And the sound was so blood curdling and so horrific, and that it was so evident that it was not a lady getting attacked. And then, of course, all the bravado just went out the door, and we were too scared to go around the corner. So we just ran away. And that's as close as I got to the banshee. And was it a banshee? I don't know. Was it some kind of animal that I don't, because some animals can make some horrific noises, but I don't know. But that was
So did any family member die of your friend group?
uh, possibly there was enough of us that it could have been. Like I know no one died in my family, uh, but yeah, it was interesting. Just the whole bravado of like, let's go and save this girl, and then it's all, ooh, run away, run away.
Man, that is so. Oh, that's creepy. And Ireland has castles, correct?
Castles, yes, yes.
So, are there any like famous haunted castles in Ireland?
Oh, there's tons. There's a castle called Dunluce,
Okay.
and you can't go half a mile without finding a castle back home or a
Okay.
standing stone or something. And I love that heritage. I love that history, and I speak Ogham, which is the ancient language, the ancient Druid language of the trees.
What's it called?
Ogham, Ogham.
Okay, this is
And
badass.
I it's a written language, so I can communicate. I write it, so everyone in my Christmas list gets messages written in Ogham that they don't know what I say, so it's very clandestine. Um, but it's a fascinating thing. It's fascinating, and it's the oldest written language, as I say, and so I love that heritage. I love going to Standing Stones. I love going to the castles and like just being there because they've been there for thousands of years, and there's been people there for thousands of years doing the same thing. Doing rituals, having Christmas Day, having parties, whatever, and you can feel that energy. And so I love that. And there's as I say, a castle called Dunluce, and what happened there was, well, so in the Troubles, over the 12th of July is the Freedom Day, the equivalent of the 4th of July. Okay. And that's when there's a lot of violence because of the contentious nature of it. So normally over the 12th fortnight, everybody, like the fortnight in July, everybody gets the 2 weeks off work because there's fire bombs, there's just riots, there's everything. So everyone gets that 2 weeks off, and most people go off to Spain, whatever, and
to avoid everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So we would go to the area where Dunluce was and the Giant's Causeway and stuff, because those places would not get, like, there was a respect of these national sites that they're not going to get attacked. So we could go camping there and get away from it. And Dunluce was this massive big castle that was right on the edge of the cliffs. And of course, the way castles are is they're built in whatever, the 5th century, and then a new bunch of tribe comes in, kills all those people. They think, well, this is we'll just add on to this castle, and then they just get built up, and things like that. And that's actually what, like, Stonehenge is. So if you know, like, the stone circles, each one of those stones is like a gravestone for an elder. And Stonehenge just isn't finished. That's the thing, is they would fill in the whole circle of the standing stones and then cover it in earth and then have a little tunnel so you could go into the middle. And it was like all the elders would be like emanating towards the middle. So then the king could go and sit in the middle of this room and get all of the energy from his ancestors. But then the Romans or the barbarians would come over and they would just see a hill. They wouldn't know that it was a gravesite. So they would think, there's a big old hill. I'm going to build my fort on top of that hill because I'll get the high ground. So then archaeologists come along nowadays and they find the remains of a Roman fort. And then they just think, we'll excavate this Roman fort. And they don't know about the ancient stuff that's underneath that. And it's only really been recently that now those have started, the mounds have started to collapse and reveal the hidden chambers and things like that then people are realizing, there's more stuff. And it's the same as like nowadays. So if you think about churches, like old churches that are being converted into nightclubs or being converted into apartment complexes, and in 500 years, when everything's derelict, archaeologists are going to find, here's a church, there's a crucifix here, but there's all these bottles of Budweiser. So this, they're not going to be able to put it together that it was converted to. They're just going to think, this cult was very hedonistic, So the lines get crossed about
right.
What was it, which I find is fascinating as well. But anyway, so back to Dunluce. So it was this castle, and it was just built on, and it was right on the edge of the cliff. And they were having a big old Henry VIII style banquet with all the lords and ladies. And there was a big old storm, and all of the kitchen staff were in the kitchen. And then the cliff just eroded, and the entire kitchen fell off the cliff and took all of the cooks and all of the servants off the cliff with them, while the people are just sitting waiting for their dinner in the banqueting room. So that's a haunted place. But there's tons. There's loads of like old monasteries that have like priest holes, because the religion would change so much that if you were the minister of whatever the previous thing was, your life was in danger from the witch finders, whatever. So they had all these like hidden passages that you'd have to hide in, when they would come, and so you could still give your sermons. And I found a ton of those. It was really great when I was growing up. You could like go into the stately manors, whatever, and you would find like these hidden doorways that would have tunnels all the way down to the shore that you could follow and get away. And really, really incredible stuff. So
It's so cool. I don't as much as the US has it's such a young country, you know. We don't have like you said they were built in the 5th century. I mean, that's just like think about that, you know, that's so
for
fucking
sure.
long ago.
Well, that's like the Steve Martin film. I think it's LA Story, maybe. And he's driving around LA with this girl that he's trying to pick up, and he's pointing around and says, "Hey, some of these buildings date back to the 1940s."
Yeah, it doesn't fare well. I know I took an underground tour of Seattle um probably 10, 15 years ago ish. But I didn't know. So Seattle is actually run on prostitution. That's what it's known for, or what it was known for. And they have tunnels all underneath the city, and it's just I don't know, such a fat. I love history like that and exploring old stuff like that. So hearing the castles, like I didn't know that that Romans, you know, would come and build on top. Like I didn't really kept building on top. I thought it was just like a total siege, and they're just like, okay, this is ours, and that was it. You know.
Yeah. No, well, that's the thing. Like, why would you go and build your own when there's something else you just add on to? You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Easy. So.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's cool that you're heavy into storytelling, and but the culture has the lore behind it. That's innate to be stories in itself.
Yep. Yep.
I think it's fucking cool. And from what I can tell, you're a cool fucking guy, Sir Brian Higgins.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we can start just wrapping this up a little bit. I like to end this with just 2 questions. How do you hope you can inspire others?
It's by being honest and accountable.
You know, I think I think to do that is kind of scary for a lot of people. I think it takes a lot to do that, and I agree with you though. I'm working on that myself. Is being accountable, being honest, and just being open, if you will.
Yep. For sure, vulnerable.
Yeah, because especially being artists, we like to present our art as the vulnerable side. Like with storytelling or really like creating films, like we could, like you said, you could relate to it on an emotional level. With the what you call it, the catnip, right? How you relate that to drinking. It's those small details that's still vulnerable enough, but it still leaves it open. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. So it's scary, but I think it's something that all artists need to be open about to an extent.
Sure. Yep.
And then what's one piece of advice that has stuck with you throughout the years, and how do you actually apply that day by day?
Well, self-esteem aspect, and imposter syndrome. A lot of artists and creative people suffer from imposter syndrome.
Oh,
and that's the great thing about creativity is it's individual. It's not mathematics. It's not scientific. Of course, it can be scientific, but 100 things can say 100 different answers, and they can all mean the same thing as well. So in my success, and whatever my success is, there's been bits and pieces here and there, I still have difficulty of like accepting it, like the humility of, and the correct answer is, oh, thank you. When people say, oh, that was great, oh, thank you, rather than, oh, and I would have difficulty, accepting it. And especially with mental health in Utah, like when I've done a couple of TED Talks, TEDx talks, and I've done I have achieved everything that I have ever that I didn't even know that I dreamt of achieving, but I still can't have that. And it's great to be of humility, rather than ego. But to get to the next level, to believe in yourself, to get to the next point, to get to where you want to be and where you should be, the whole aspect that I was saying, I need to start believing the hype. And one of my friends says, no, you need to believe the facts. And that has been helpful. On paper, the facts are there. So of course you can do it. Of course you can get to wherever you want to be because the facts are there. You've done it before. You can do it again.
I think that's great advice. Well, number one, thank you for coming on. Mm-hmm. I appreciate it. Especially, I'm excited to have you as the first guest of 2021. I know we talked about it and the holidays got away, so I'm glad it officially
that's
happened.
Fine and dandy. Yeah, cool.
And where can people find you?
Well, mentalhealthyutah.org and Facebook, the whole whack. But if you want to find more about the nonprofit, mentalhealthyutah.org. Also Mental Healthy Fit, but Mental Healthy Utah will get you there. So
cool. And are you working on anything for 2021, like project wise, or?
Yep, I am doing a documentary about refugee youth mental health called Welcome, and it's sort of looking at welcoming refugees, but also welcoming your mental health, welcoming it as a benefit and a superpower, so to speak. And it's going to be premiering on PBS on February 16th, and in conjunction with Ken Burns' new documentary.
What?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Well, so it's an exclusive for your podcast.
No, I saw you post something about PBS, but I didn't know it was a documentary that you've done. I think, dude, that's fucking cool.
Yeah. Well, we're still making it, and it only came about like just at the beginning of December. So, but they reached out to me because I can put those things together. Again, got to believe the facts that I can do it. To say Richard Branson is one of my stalwarts, and his saying was, screw it, let's do it. And you can hum and ha and say no to things and think, I'm not good enough, but you can only say no once. If you say yes, you can work out how to do it until you get there. But if you say no, that's the end of the story right there.
Yeah, there's no working it out. Yeah.
Yeah. So screw it. Let's do it. That's another thing. It's another bit of advice.
I love it. It's like, just go get it, Well, cool. So check out his documentary when that airs on February 16th, correct?
Yep.
Did it right. I think that's fantastic. I'll be tuning into that. But yeah, follow the podcast on all the media webs. And yeah, Brian, thank you, Sir Higgins, for coming on.
Happy days.
So, okay, well,
cool.
We'll keep in touch because I want to work with you on a lot of stuff.
Yep, happy days.